Here's another question for one of my Achei students. A very smart kid, but he's about 20, 21 at this point. Maybe he was 19 when he wrote the question. And I'm giving context because I want you to appreciate how I'm answering the question. Is it accurate to say that Chabad's opinion is that it is good or better to help someone before helping yourself? For example, Achei encourages Bracham to go on Mivtzayim. For the most part, we are all there to work on some issues we have with the world or with Yiddishkeit, but we still have an obligation to help others. Is it accurate to say that Chabad's opinion is that it is good or better to help someone for helping yourself? For example, Achei encourages boys to go on Mivtzayim even though their place in yeshiva is really serving themselves because of whatever issues they have with the world and Yiddishkeit, and still we take the boys on Mivtzayim. So first of all, there's such a thing called pekuach nefesh, which means that someone's life is in danger. And when someone's life is in danger, there are different rules. In other words, the idea that you come before somebody else is when all things are considered equal. Like the Alter Rebbe brings in Yigeres HaKodesh, if it says ayin, biyad echad tzitin shel mayim, if a jug of water, if there's not enough for both of you to survive a desert, so then you come first. But if for one person it's zevach mishpacha, it's luxuries of life, for the other person it's survival, there are different rules. So there's a place to put somebody before yourself for the simple reason that their need is a pekuach nefesh need, and your need is an quality of life need, is in making your life even better. And you could make a very good argument that the whole idea of Mivtzayim and Shlichus is literally pekuach nefesh, because although we don't know how effective our Mivtzayim are going to be, but we are dealing with Jewish people that if left alone will literally disappear, them and their children and their families, ad save kol hadatus, forever. Which alone is enough of a reason to put the idea of being makad of somebody else before makad of yourself first, even though according to Torah and according to halacha, you're supposed to put yourself first. And of course, this question is compounded by the fact that going on Mivtzayim has its own risks. You're going out into the world and you're being exposed to things that perhaps in Brooklyn you would not be exposed to. The Rebbe spoke about that and talked about the idea of the Aidi Deparad Lemiflat Lebola. When you're busy being a mashpia, you're not at the same time able to be a makabel. But it's still a significant part of the challenge of the whole idea of Mivtzayim. But in addition to the idea of pekuach nefesh, there's another thing, and this is very, very important. And that is that the Rebbe holds that when we're makad of somebody else, we're makad of ourselves. In other words, the Lubavitcher Chinuch is not only about sacrifice, although there's no question that Lubavitcher Chinuch is based on Mesiras Nefesh and Pekuach Nefesh. We put ourselves out for others, put other people before ourselves because we're in the business of saving lives. But the Rebbe has made this into something which is defining us as a community. It's a way of life. It's not just a circumstance. It's a way of life. The Deira Shvi philosophy, the Rebbe's philosophy, is that you put yourself aside for the benefit of somebody else. There's no question about it. But part of the reason that Rebbe does this is not only because there are Jews who need saving, but because it's the best way to save ourselves. And the Rebbe, in the very first Maimed, when he became a Rebbe, in the Basi Legani, said this in the following way, and I'm going to repeat it here because I think it's important, that he spoke about Avraham Avinu, and that Avraham Avinu dedicated his life to being makad of others to the Eibishter, like it says in the Pasuk, Vayikra Shem B'Shem Hashem Kei Elam, that he announced to the whole world that God and the world are one and the same thing. In other words, not only is God the master of the world, which would have been novel enough at that time, but that there's a oneness between God and creation. But Al Tikra Vayikra Vayakri, like Chazal bring and Rashi brings it, they got other people to call as well. So the Rebbe brought from the Sfarim that give us Klolim of Teresh Baal Peh, that the rule of Al Tikri, you have to read it twice, read it both ways. The rule of Al Tikri says the Mishnah or the Pasuk is written one way, and you have to read it differently. But you don't only read it differently, you read it the way it is in the original, plus you read it in the new way. Al Tikri Elo. So the Rebbe said, therefore, when it says in the Pasuk, Vayikra Shem Avram B'Shem Hashem Kei Elam, Avram called, and the Chazal said, Al Tikri Vayikra Vayakri, you have to read it twice. He called and he got others to call. And then the Rebbe said very, very emotionally that the meaning of this dual reading of this word says, Oib du willst, as dir soll eingehen, der Vayikra muss sein der Vayakri. If you want to bring yourself closer to God, you have to bring somebody else closer. If you want to successfully call God on behalf of yourself, you have to call God on behalf of somebody else. Meaning that the whole idea of shlichus and the idea of outreach is first and foremost serving ourselves. And this is a fact of life. It's a fact of life. First of all, it's a known tradition by mashpiyim that when a kid suffers with a yanim of amunah, struggles with matters of faith, one of the solutions is to take him on miftzayim. It's a better solution than having a fabrengen and berating him or giving him mashke. Because when you're in a position to give Yiddishkeit to somebody else, you somehow find your own Yid. It's just one of those things. And you often bypass all of the blockages that someone may have between himself and his own Yid. By the virtue of the fact that he's bringing somebody else close, he finds that he's bringing himself closer far more than he's bringing anybody else close. Or to say it in more psychological terms, one of the big issues with Yiddishkeit in general in America, and especially for young people, is that we don't take it that seriously. We don't consider it that serious. It's a culture almost, rather than a truth and a religion and a connection to God. And few things make us more earnest about our Shabbos and our kosher and our tefillin and our mikveh and our Talmud Torah and our midas tovis and our limud Chassidus than when we find ourselves impressing it on somebody else, because it makes us realize how much we believe it, how important it is to us. So in effect, we're makar of ourselves. I heard, I think I even read, that Rav Dov Yehuda Shochat, who was a Gaon Amiti, he lived in Toronto, and his children learned on the Lubavitch for the most part, and that he once asked the Rebbe about his son Harav Yankov Emanuel Olav Shalom, who was a real lamdan, a real brain, a real Talmud Chacham, that maybe he should be made an exception to the rule of Merkeshlichas. The Bachim used to go out this summer to be makar of people, and they took off weeks of their learning. It was really their vacation time, but after all, even vacation time is learning if you're a serious person. To go to Arei Asada to be makar of people, and Rabbi Shachat suggested that perhaps his son Harav Yankov Emanuel would be an exception to that rule, so he can sit and learn Teda. And the Rebbe told him that as part of the chinuch, part of the Lubavitch chinuch is the idea of giving of ourselves to others, because when we give to another, we grow ourselves up in a way which is far more efficient and far more effective and far more deep than if we sit with ourselves. So there is no doubt that there is an idea of putting another person before ourselves, especially when we're dealing with pekuach nefesh, which is more often than not the case in our times. But there's also the idea that we're makar of somebody else, we're makar of ourselves. Not just to Teda and mitzvahs, but to the Eibishter himself.